Okay, I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's live webinar entitled Mastering Lab Data Management and Data Science with Zontal's Digital Transformation Platform. Today's session is presented by Zontal and is sponsored by and brought to you by Astrix. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. And before we get into today's presentation materials, I want to take a moment and just introduce you to Astrix. If you haven't been on any of our webinars, as of yet, we welcome you. If you've been to our webinars, we thank you for coming back. We put these on a fairly regular basis, and we bring in thought leaders from throughout the life science industry to come in and talk about, we can go to the previous slide if you don't mind. We can, we'll typically bring on experts like the ones we have on today to go through technology trends, what's happening within the space. Who Astrix is, we are a professional services company. We work with a wide array of different technologies in the industry. We were established in 1995. We do work with lots of vendors, but we are vendor and platform agnostic, meaning we try to help customers put together the best technology stacks based on their unique environment and needs. We have locations in the United States and overseas. We have over 1,200 employees, and 90% of those are team members who hold advanced science degrees. So we are very much a science-based organization providing services to science-based companies. Our headquarters are in beautiful Red Bank, New Jersey. And who we help is everybody from startups to Fortune 1000. We do work predominantly within the life science sector, but we also work in chemical, CPG. We do government agency work as well as research institutions. So that's just a little bit about the company, and we can go to the next slide, please. And then in terms of the services we provide, we like to say we have services that accelerate digital transformation and optimize performance across your entire ecosystem. That could be everything from, in the very beginnings when we start working with companies, oftentimes we're doing things like strategic innovation projects or enterprise architecture projects. That's where we're helping companies understand what's the application, the data architecture, the solution architecture, any integration strategies that they may need, and what are maybe some of the user requirements, roadmaps, business analysis that may go along with that, essentially helping companies get on the right track as far as where they want to go from a technology standpoint. From there, we may assist with the selection, the actual selection of services or selection of software applications. We do that in a variety of ways, everything from RFP development through vendor reference checking. From there, we can help with the development and the implementation. And then when that's done, we can help with computer systems validation. We also do provide ongoing application support in a lot of different ways. We provide that as managed services or direct on-site services. We also can staff your laboratory or staff IT and technical folks through our staffing side of the business, which is one of the things that makes us quite unique. So that's just a little bit about who Astrix is, what we do within the industry, and why we're presenting to you today. So I'd like to now switch gears and introduce our speakers for today. We've got two speakers with us today. On first is going to be Dr. Christof Gaenzler. He's the Director of Pre-Sales and Product Marketing at Zontal. He's gonna take us from the beginning, and then as we get through the presentation, Dr. Della Corte is the Chief Science Officer at Zontal. He's going to be joining us as well and lending some of his expertise too. Again, when we get to the end, we can open this up for questions, but I encourage you to ask them as we're going through, and we will do our best to field as many of the questions as we can when we get to the end. So with that, Christof, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you. I'm going to go on mute and enjoy the presentation, and I'll be back on at the end.
Thank you, Kevin, and welcome to the Zontal webinar sponsored by Astrix. It's really nice to be here. I'm happy to be there for you in the next couple of, in the next half hour or so to discuss what Zontal is doing and why we're doing this. And this is really at the heart of everything. We turn data into corporate assets, and we make data available for reuse. And of course, we secure compliance and data integrity. And how we do this, and with a couple of examples, I will lead you through the first few slides, and then also give you, of course, a little bit of a demo of the system itself. Okay, so the life science data platform that we have created and that is available on many customers already, this is really about the digital lab and life science analytics, which Dennis will later dive deep into. And I will also give you a glimpse on how we do data preservation. But first of all, I will give you an overview of Zontal, then show you the ELN integration as an example, and data preservation, and talk about a little bit about our analytical operations hub. And then I will hand over to Dennis, who will talk about the life science analytics, and in the end, we have a Q&A. Okay, so what is Zontal? Zontal really addresses the four most common issues associated with data aggregation, transformation of data, analysis of data, and everything in the scientific field, everything for scientific-led companies. So if you have an issue with managing all your data that is captured in your labs from instruments, software systems, and of course scientists typing, and we wouldn't like to eliminate manual data transfer entirely between systems, between labs, and improve the throughput really. And of course, what comes with that if we automate that is data quality and compliance. And as a third point, really the issue that we see a lot is that putting all of these data to work to have operational data science running on these data assets that you have collected. This is something that you can do directly inside Zontal. And of course, the basis for everything is fair data. And we really mean fair data because it is all of the aspects of fair captured across all of your different discovery, research, development, and manufacturing groups. So Zontal can really aggregate everything and make really everything fair. And this is what I'm going to show you today. And it's not a one-way street. The life science data and digital transformation platform is really here in the middle, and you will see several versions of this slide. What I would like to show you first and point to you first, it is not only a fair data platform or data lake, it is all about automation to getting data in and to also communicate data out. So it's bidirectional. That's why you can see always two lines going from and to the instruments, going from and to the experiment and planning software tools like ELNs and LIMS systems. And you can, of course, automate that whole the whole workflow by scripting, by using automation tools. It is, after all, like every instrument is not only a data generator, but it also receives, of course, tasks that it should do. So everything around this planning, communicating with the instrument, and then letting the instrument do the measurement and then read the result back in and put that everything together into one data package that is enriched by metadata. This is the fair data platform of Zontal. So a realistic view of most life science companies currently is really that there is a department by department approach. Everybody tries to solve this data acquisition, preservation, and reuse by themselves, and it's really dependent on the technology, the instrument, or even the software of the instrument. So if the instrument software provides APIs, you can dig into it and so on. If the software changes, you might have to change your APIs. Same thing for the file-based version here on the left-hand side. If the instrument gives you files, you have to parse the files. If the instrument gets a software update, the files might not be parsable anymore because the file itself, the structure has changed. So all of these things are very focused on individual instruments or individual groups. And so we would like to overcome this by having one central data platform. So what we do is really we're looking out for new data. That's the middle part. After you planned, you would like to get the data in after the run of the instrument. And so we have file watchers. That is the still the most of the time the instruments are producing one file or several files, folder structures, and we're grabbing this and we actually put metadata on it and reference the data, put it in an ontology, create a big JSON file out of it, which is transformed into an ADF. It's an allotrope data format. And then we store the original data, the JSON, the ADF, and we store all of the information that we got from this information package, the ADF, we store into a database that people can query via SQL or by APIs, of course. And that is not only true for files. This is true if your instrument has a database or several instruments share a database. We can also, if you're working with like an S3 bucket, we can have a cloud watcher waiting to see something new dropping into the S3 bucket. Or of course, and these are the API structure of Zontal. Of course, we can use APIs of your systems to be alerted even that there is something new. And then it goes the same way. It always is enriched, the metadata is stored, and the metadata, of course, is indexed so that you can search for your experiments, find them again, and look at them, and so on. So this is the middle part, which is really the data flow into Zontal. And this might look super busy. You don't have to read all the text. It just indicates this is a metadata extraction or data and metadata extraction from Masslinks. Masslinks is has a lot of contextual metadata, of course, and we can extract in this case from the instrument itself the files, but it's not only the files. We of course extract the file name, the folder name, and the data from any parsable file. So we can actually have we can map it to a metadata catalog and then save it into Zontal. And I've talked a little bit already about this package structure. So the information package really is holding all of the data descriptions, all of the data that was produced, and everything in one place. So this makes the ADF, the allotrope format makes this possible to really have everything about an experiment stored in one package. And so it's an open format. It's literally a zip file where all of the data is in, and it's organized in a way that you can always go back into these files and look for all the data. All the metadata is explained and leads to or links the data and the metadata together. And how this is done is through ontologies and the data models that are also stored inside this information package. So now let's switch gears a little. I want to show you how this looks like for an ELN integration. And sometimes for normal users, you won't see a lot about Zontal, but I would like to show you on a normal example how this works. And so in principle, this is what's happening. We can of course feed the analytical method already into the ELN, and I will show you from the ELN to do an analysis request. Then the analysis request is run, and then automatically the test result is pushed back, is received from Zontal and pushed back into the experiment of the ELN. So by this, we mean, well, all of these steps, and you see here our Zontal fair data bar again, and it is really an automated process that is executed here. So let me quickly go to our signals, Revity signals, and ELN, and so we can here, for example, just look at. Oops, of course it timed out while I was talking. So we can look into experiments, and you can see here already, like this is a sample prep I requested, and back here you can see that some measurements came back. So we will exactly do this now with a new one. So when we add a new experiment, I can create this, and now we have, this is an empty experiment. So usually you're taking a template, of course, but to make it really obvious here, I want a sample prep, and this is all empty here. Yeah, I can of course put data in, but that's not what I want in the sample prep. I would like to have a measurement done on my sample. And you can see there's like, if you're a user of Signals Notebook of Revity, you don't have these Zontal buttons usually. And they are now the automation buttons that I can actually say, for this sample, please, I would like to submit this for a measurement. And then of course I can say, well, which instrument I would like to have this measured with. And I'm going with this. And this is actually what you're seeing here. This is part of Zontal. So this is Signals. This has its own life, its own user interface. And now what you can see here is, of course, this is submitted. So there's nothing in here yet, but it's active. So it is really now going to, and this is our measurement here. So I can look for my instrument. Hope I find it. Here it is. And you can see I have my AS12 sample already here in the queue. I can start the measurement. So this is of course a virtual. There is no instrument behind it, but what it's doing now, it is released and it is measured. So we can find it again in the finished measurements here. And the finished measurements here, we can see this is executed. And yes, we can do our calculations. And in this case, you also have to add a signature. So this is what we do. This is okay. We can confirm it. It is coming with my username, and I can just start transferring it again. So the results now are passed through Zontal back into my experiment. And well, not yet. Yeah, it takes some time. So all of these systems, unfortunately, are on different continents. So we have the signals in the US running. We have the AG, what you just saw, the is running in Germany, and the Zontal piece is also running in Germany. So we are crossing the big pond a couple of times. But what you can see here, it's automatically popping up. So now our measurements are here back in the signals experiment, and so I can go on working with other things and in the experiment. So this is how Zontal is under the hood automating the entire workflow. And if I'm looking at it, I can I can actually go here and say, or what is this? We can see here, there is in the back, there is my my way in of the Zontal bot has done its work, and it is to the LDC cockpit further. And so we have also, and this is the way back into the notebook, and we're not only storing the direct measurements which we get out of the experiment, but it actually created a PDF as well, which we could also, of course, put into the ELN, into the experiment report. But here, Zontal is aggregating all of the data that is forwarded and automated. And I hope this gave you a little glimpse of how Zontal can actually, under the hood, do that automation. And with all, this is of course a very simple example, with all of the other data that occurs in the lab as well. So just to recap, this is our little Zontal button here inside Signal's notebook. It's also inside IDBS and a couple of other ELNs and LIMS systems. So this is the integration point that all of the systems usually have. And then this lower level, this lower, on the lower left, this is coming from the Zontal platform itself, so that Zontal knows where to send it to. So if this is usually a choice of the scientist. And of course, other CDS systems work as well. And here is the integration here in this time in the application, under the applications tab of Waters Empower. And so there is a hook for us as well that we can integrate. And what comes back then doesn't need to be just one line and a couple of measurements. It can actually be a lot more and a lot more detailed, like an entire peak table, for example. So let's go to data preservation. And it's a really big thing for many labs, not necessarily for the individual scientist, but to preserve data over many years, and make sure that you can decommission systems and so on. This is a really hot topic and has been a hot topic for many years. So what we're doing, and you have seen it now, whenever data comes in, we can handle this data, we can integrate the data with the other data points. And of course, we save everything and we make it searchable and findable. So all of that data can be made fair. And that all of the four categories here apply. And during the ingestion process, and I showed that before, that it's a JSON format, but then it is an allotrope format, and it goes into the multimodal database and so on. So we are really making sure everybody has access to it and finds it, and actually it's storing it, of course, in an open platform, in an open format. So Zontal uses these open standards and ontologies of allotrope to really store the data also for the long term. And once aligned, Zontal becomes a fair data hub. Data is exchanged with enterprise systems, as you just saw. It provides a single source of truth. And of course, it allows the original data and the entire lineage to be preserved. So every data set has its track record. And if I go quickly back into Zontal, you can actually see that. So everywhere you have an audit trail. So in this audit trail, just for our little experiment here, there you see what was done and when. So applying the updates to the IDF file, you see all of the things that have been done with that data point. And of course, this list can get relatively long for complicated experiments and so on. So, but every little data point inside Zontal has this, and you will see this audit trail icon everywhere. So, and what everybody knows, like with each migration, context, meaning, and reusability of knowledge is actually lost. So we have from one legacy system to the next legacy system to the current production system. Like every time the data is exported and imported, this is some information is lost, and so we cannot we can never get this back. And the idea of Zontal is, of course, to get all of this data in, including the existing track records of the data points, including the experiments, including the results, and then store it inside Zontal. That means you can, over time, have biology, chemistry ELNs, limb systems, and even individual systems that are connected to instruments. They are read, all of the data is read into Zontal. And it is, of course, then made fair. And it has all of the reports. It has, as I showed you, the PDFs, whatever is in that system will be available in Zontal. For search, of course, for legal and regulatory and reporting. Of course, yeah, you can always look still at the experiments. We have a sample viewer and all of these nice possibilities to view the data inside, and Dennis will show some of these. And of course, you can also, and this is a really good thing from my point of view, you can reuse that data that you have stored from your legacy systems now with statistics or even machine learning, and compare it to your latest data and so on. So I will quickly jump through that. The data preservation is really all about the metadata, and the data is archived. You have the full audit trail for everything that happened and that will happen to that data. This is just you have seen this before. So all of these data fields or metadata fields are, of course, indexed. You can find them. The data structure is preserved, so you have all of your raw data files and the calculated results. Everything is in one place and can be explored and stored and, of course, worked with in Zontal. So the audit trails I also showed you before. So this is really something that is extremely important for the for this long-term preservation. And what I didn't show you, this is just a screenshot of it. It has a preservation capability that goes really where regulatory goes. So you have a configurable retention policy to meet all of your requirements also for IP. And so this is also inside Zontal, which is if you delete a data point or a raw data, then you still retain the track record. You still retain, okay, there we had this data once, but it is deleted. So everything is deleted, but of course the audit trail is not. So, and this is looking at the time, I will quickly go over our operations hub, which is a concept that is on top of the Fair Data platform, which really is, and that's really text heavy. I will take you through it. The Analytical Operation Hub provides really the foundation for the integration, something that you have seen in my demo, between instruments and robotics equipment and the software ecosystem in the lab as a whole. So this is what I've showed you to really get something out of an ELN, push it towards an instrument, retrieving back the results and communicating the results in whatever format is necessary back to the experiment. So all of these operations that are created and automations are created are inside the operations hub. And so you have the possibility to configure all of these workflows and inside Zontal. And so you can directly for the user or indirectly by automating it, push these workflows forward. And every transformation, as I said, is in the audit trail. You always know what has been done to which data set. And of course, the viewers are very important. You can always, the users can always look at the data. They can see it if they want to see it in a database view, if you want to see it graphical, that's all inside Zontal. So I have talked about it a couple of times now. Most integrations currently are still, unfortunately, manual. So you have to plan your experiment, then you go to the instrument, put the plate map into the instrument or whatever you're testing, and then you come back, and then you need the plate map again with like your analysis tool and so on. So there are integrations, but they're usually point integrations, and the idea of the operations hub is to capture everything and to make sure that these steps are automated and reusable and there in real time for everybody. So this is, in short, not only what I've shown you, but for everything from the experiment planning to the instrument doing the measurement and back to the experiment. So this is really the idea of digitalization of the lab, where you can plan and execute and then use the results again to plan the next step. So, and these are just a couple of screenshots of this operations hub, where you have the possibility directly in Zontal to create these operations and the workflows. And of course, we know we have an API first approach as well. Everything that you can do everything and more can be done with the APIs. So the processes have their own APIs. You can see that there's stages, events, and operations, and of course process actions. All of these APIs can be used to outgoing and of course incoming requests to a platform, and this is just an example of that. So everything, as I said, is an operations building. It's an operations hub that leaves us, of course, with the idea of, hey, we can report on these operations as well. And I have, just before I hand over here, I have created a direct interaction. Now this is Spotfire, and this is directly connected to that SQL front end that is inside Zontal. So you can just point your Spotfire or whatever other analysis tool that you're using and really make interactive visual reports. Here is a timeline over all NMR results that were generated and stored. You can see these are the instruments, and you can of course then look at outliers here very easily. So why is this gray in this case, and so on, and you can drill down. And this is of course true not only for NMR. They could look a little different. I have tried to keep them consistent on top, so you can actually have here timeline again and drill down into the details of the different plates, instrument softwares in this case, which is also captured, of course, in the metadata and so on. And of course, with the direct link back into Zontal so that the scientists can actually jump from Zontal into the external application, or and then back again. Okay, with this, I would like to hand over to Dennis, but before I do that, we have a user group meeting coming up in October, on October 3rd in Basel, one day before Biotech X starts. So if any one of you plans to come to Biotech X in Basel, which is October 4th then, and the next couple of days, on October 3rd in the afternoon, we have a user group meeting, and I'm happy to share the link again later, so info.zontal.io/UGM1, because that's our first in-person user group meeting that we do. And so, yeah, I hope I can see some of you there. And with that, I'm happy to hand over to Dennis.
Christof, audio check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Then let me take over the screen here. I think I have to be made a panelist by the organizers to share my screen. Aha, that's better.
Yes, Dennis, you've been made a presenter. You can go ahead.
Okay, now that works. Mm-hmm.
Christof, it looked like Dennis might have dropped, so we'll probably give him a second until he gets back on.
Oh,
go ahead.
yeah.
My screen is coming through, I assume?
Yes, your screen is coming through and the recording has started again.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, great. So my name is Della Corte, and I've created something called the Life Science Analytics team within Zontal. My training is that of a data scientist, and I believe it's not enough to just take data and put it somewhere in the cloud, but to actually bring business value by making the data also accessible in environments that are natively intuitive for the scientists that want to get information out of the data to help them make good decisions. And so what I want to show you today is a 50,000 feet view of a few of the applications that we have built. We are running a little bit late in this webinar, so I'm not going to go into a lot of live demonstrations, but I'll give you a general overview of what's possible within the platform. And so Christof has already showed you a slide that shows in general how one can visualize Zontal as this big platform in the center between all types of data producers at the bottom, and then third-party applications on top of it. Now, when we look into these applications, what we find is that depending on which laboratory we work with, be it chemistry or biology, there's a different set of instruments that we encounter over and over again. And lots of these instruments are being used to generate reports. And those reports are handed on to other people in the organization that may or may not be able to interpret the data from the instruments because they don't have necessarily the expert software. So common cases, for example, nuclear magnetic resonance, where if you have a Bruker instrument, for example, you might want to run the topspin software. But there's only a handful of seats of licenses within your organization. So whenever you create a spectrum or do some analysis, it's not trivial to disseminate that in a way where others can interact with it. And so what we have done, therefore, is for very commonly used instruments, build application support. And so here's an example of an NMR spectrum that was ingested within Zontal that can then be visualized natively. So I'm going to show you how this application works. And what I'm showing you is the complete view from how an instrument creates data, how the data is captured and then made available in Zontal. Here we see a folder structure. that is just sitting on some file share, that is where the NMR instrument puts its data. So I can see here the acquisition files that come out of the NMR, and then the process data that is being generated by Topspin. Now, if I trigger an ingestion of this data, this tells Zontal that's configured to monitor this file share, hey, there is a new file in here. And if I update this, then I can see that within Zontal, there is a new information package that's being created, which points to that directory. And now an ingest is triggered that takes all of this data and automatically makes it available in the platform. First, it has to make sure that the data fulfills all the quality requirements that have been defined. So for example, the metadata is correctly attributed to it, the acquisition files are complete and closed, and no one is currently working on the process data. If that's all done, then the ingest will run through and the file will be sitting in here, and we can see on the right side, for example, the instrument, year, nucleus information being correctly parsed. We can also see that the entire folder structure is contained within Zontal. We have the different acquired files as well as the process files in here. What's better than just having the files is to use our vendor neutral representation. So for that, we can look into the database, and the database will contain a snapshot of how we have harmonized the data. So it's no longer in a Bruker specific format, for example. So here we can see the different metadata tags that come from the experiment table. So we can see the acquisition parameters, the dates. We can also look into the raw fit that was captured. It will bring up a plot here, so we can see the inductance decay, and then we can also see the process spectrum. So that is the default functionality that we have for any data in Zontal, but for the NMR data, we have specifically also these viewers configured that allow us to rapidly visualize in an interactive fashion what the process data looks like, because that is normally what you want to disseminate and share with others. So we have these graphs that you can interact with, you can zoom on them, you can scroll around, and you can also export these figures. And once you export them, you make them still interactive as HTML objects, but these become embeddable. So if you have a third-party vendor solution, maybe an ELN or so, you can embed these images that are Zontal hosted and thereby make all the data freely accessible. Next to NMR, we have done that for a variety of other instruments, for example, for mass spectrometry. There we deal oftentimes with the issue that instruments from different vendors produce different default data. And in order for that data to be visualized in the same way, you have to do major harmonizations. So for example, the individual MS1 and up to MSN spectra, they're normally captured in the same way, but the way that they calculate chromatograms by default out of these spectra is not the same across all vendors. And so Zontal has built out a standardization pipeline that calculates chromatograms that are always the same for all type of instruments, and thereby allows you as a scientist to get the same user experience independent on which lab and which instrument collected the data. And that can help you to make comparisons between samples that were captured by different people at different times or different instruments without having to open 3 or 4 different software tools and exporting things and manually wrangling with it. I think that demonstration we're going to skip for purpose of time, but what we're going to look into instead is interactive reporting for another technique that is frequently used, which is called flow cytometry. Flow cytometry is a technique that you use to look into individual cells and how the proteins on those cells change. And because there are lots of proteins on a cell, there are lots of different ways of how you can stain them and collect data. And that complicated experimental setup requires a bit of creativity also when you investigate and analyze the data. And not every flow cytometrist uses exactly the same process. So if you want to instill trust across your scientists and make sure that they are okay with the results that they receive from a colleague, you have to give them an environment in which they can quickly check, for example, compensations and gating strategies. And because, again, licenses are not always available to everyone, we thought it's a great idea to allow Zontal not only to capture flow cytometry data, but also to allow the analysis of it. And so I'm going to show you an example of that now. Here we have a data set that consists of raw data, planning data, and analyzed data, meaning we have an Excel sheet where the data, where the experiment was planned, and then we also have a FlowJo session where the data was analyzed. And so all of that data is now being harmonized in this one view, where I get a plate view on the left side that allows me to query individual wells. And then I get instantly the information that you would typically get out of FlowJo session in an interactive dashboard, where I can check, for example, the gated populations. I can look at the impact that different compensation strategies have. I can create little plots that allow me to investigate the behavior of different channels within that specific well experiment. And I can also visualize the complete gating history that was applied. And this way, I'm completely independent of an expert tool. I can just within the Zontal space system, pull up the data and get a full view on where it comes from, how it was managed, and how it was interpreted, so that you don't have to repeat experiments and can share results with confidence. We effectively can take the data that is here and just embed it in the PowerPoint presentation. And within one click on that presentation, you go back into Zontal and then have this rich live environment in which you can reanalyze to your heart's content. Other applications that we support are, for example, plate readers, a large variety of them. And in most of these cases, we are always dealing with the same setup, that you have a biological lab that is doing many manual processes to read data out from different wells, normally exporting them into some intermediate format, a CSV, an Excel sheet, copying things back and forth, maybe using GraphPad, Prism, or Softmax Pro, but effectively always creating the same type of visualizations in order to understand how different compounds behave. And what we can do now with Zontal is we can automate all of these processes so that the manual overhead really goes down to zero, and you can just automatically capture data and then go into no coding, just clicking environments where you can rapidly configure the type of visualizations that help your scientists make the right decisions. Something else that Zontal is building out is machine learning capabilities. So we have, for example, a generic machine learning framework. Again, for sake of time, I'm not going to go into this one too much, but instead I tell you a specific application of that framework. We have worked in pathology and also in cell assays. So I'm going to show you an example of how we deal with cell assays. So here we're using an instrument called CDEX that is looking at different cell populations and tries to identify which ones are alive or which ones are dead. And so let me start this demonstration here, where we initially first look for the data. We find here the CDEX data. We look at it, we see some metadata that was extracted as Zontal captured the information, but then particularly I'm able to start the cell counter viewer that allows me now to visually inspect this information. So I have a few different images that are collected. I get some holistic statistics. So for example, there are 1,200 viable cells here. If I select my annotation type, I can now leverage the artificial intelligence that we use on ingest of the data to automatically annotate where we have live cells and where we have dead cells. And this brings great benefits with it, because normal statistics-based tools are able to do this type of classification, but they're always subject to the rules that the scientist defines. Within our framework, we can also explore more interesting events like mitosis events or cell blips on the surface of the cells, and all of that helps us to bring again more information in a richer content to the scientists than otherwise possible. So overall, Zontal has built up a very strong data science team that is currently building out dozens of these type of applications. We have a very strong product portfolio that deals with most common systems, but we also have a very agile team that can quickly dive into new solutions and new applications that we don't have support for yet. So if that's something that you're interested in, collecting data and then actually making this data directly in the cloud accessible to everyone in your organization so that they can make better decisions, then it would be a great idea to dive deeper and see how Zontal can help you redefine what the future of the digital lab really can be. With this, I thank you for your attention. I bring up again our slide from the user group meeting, invite you to join, and pass the ball back to the organizers. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much for a really cool presentation, Dennis. That was fantastic, and Christof as well. We're going to go ahead and get a couple things here. We'll get the recording stopped.